Thank you for joining us on the Person to Person Network. Welcome to Profiles in STEM. Our career series will feature an amazing STEM professional who is shaping lives and building the future. I'm your host, Katie Culbert, and joining me today, we have a very special woman in STEM, Dr. Ellen Julian. Dr. Julian is the principal and founder of Julian Psychometric Counseling. Dr. Julian, welcome to our program.
Thank you.
Dr. Julian, I would like to step back in time and go back to a particular moment when you knew you wanted to pursue a career in STEM.
I didn't know it was STEM at the time, but I've always wondered why and how do they do that? And as early as second grade, when my little sister got an easier test, it seemed a lot easier because she had blocks and cartoons and things. This was an intelligence test. And I was in school, so they gave me reading passages and math problems. And I thought that was terribly unfair because my test was so much harder than hers. And I complained so much that my mother finally said, and it showed you were 4 points smarter than she was. Well, of course, I had to believe it because I knew that was right. But how could they tell? She got an easier test. Well, first, it was a totally different test. And how could they compare? And hers was easier, and they could still tell I was smarter. So that left me wondering about how they build tests early on. That same year, that was a big year, she was getting ready to go into school, and they had her draw a person. It's called the Draw a Man test. And because she put ears and fingers on her man, they knew she was ready to go to school. What does drawing a man have to do with going to school? And how did they figure that out? And if I forget to put ears on my person, because most of the people I knew didn't have ears showing, would they decide I wasn't ready for school and take me out? This was almost traumatic. But again, it was, how do they do that? How could they figure that out? And there's been a whole series of important tests in my life that, fortunately for me, I like tests. They've usually gone pretty well. You know, like I'm 4 points smarter than my sister. And by the way, 4 points is nothing. That's within a standard error of measurement. But just think how the world would have been different if she had been 4 points smarter than I would have. I would have dismissed this whole testing thing as nonsense. So I've been fascinated by tests forever, and kind of knew I'd like to go into them. Now, I was thinking more personality tests. I like to put numbers on things. I like to know how much, and that's really what testing is all about. So psychometrics, I think one of your questions may be, what is psychometrics? I'm going to answer that now. Psychometrics is the measurement metrics of the mind, psycho. So psychometrics is measuring the mind, and it's how to build standardized tests. More specifically, it's the statistics behind standardized tests. And I'm a consultant in that now, not a counselor.
Thank you for telling us about psychometrics and breaking it down for us. I think that is really amazing that you were always drawn to tests and then it just kind of led to your career. Dr. Julian, can you describe what it is about psychometrics that fascinates you?
I like tests. I like being able to figure out what people know or what people are like, and being able to put labels on it. Sometimes those labels are numbers, sometimes those labels are categories, like personality tests. You know, what kind of personality do you have? Those are tests, just like the how much do you know tests, where your school teacher creates them and they draw a line, this is enough, and more than that you pass, less than that you fail. Or there's tests where you just try to rank order people for admissions, say like the SAT or the ACT, where you just say, how much do they know? And the test doesn't say, is that enough or not? It's just somebody else, like the medical school or the college, says, along with everything else that we know about this person, does it look like they'll be able to do our work? And some people with a lower score will get in because they have a lot of other stuff that looks really good. Some people with the highest score, it's so high, they say, I don't care if they can get along with people. I don't care anything else. If they know this much, we'll take them anyway. Admissions is a balance. And I have to say that for the kids, because y'all are all going to be taking the ACT and the SAT soon and putting a whole lot of weight on those scores. If you do really well, it makes a difference. If you do really poorly, it makes a difference. In between, it's just one more factor among many. And I just see so many ways that tests are used. And as I've been more exposed to the variety out there, I've seen more ways that tests can be misused. I came of age in the testing profession during the No Child Left Behind era. Ancient history for you guys. But it was when all of the testing came into the public schools. And it was really too much testing. And it did get in the way of instruction. And teachers were being paid based on their students' test scores. And there was all sorts of problems with that. And those of us in the profession could see the problems. And the politicians were making these decisions, and tests were getting attacked. That was a really hard time to be a testing professional, because so many people thought that the tests were evil at that point. And it's just the use of the test. It's not the test itself, it's just the way people are using them. And so a lot of my recent profession has been trying to help certification organizations specifically. Like, you have to take a test to be a physician, you have to take a test to be a nurse, you have to take a test to be a hairdresser, you have to take a test to be a crane operator. There's a wide variety of professions that have certification exams. And some of them are really poorly made. Some of them are very excellently made. And so I've been helping this variety of different professions improve their tests so that it's more fair to everybody. And so the people who are getting the higher scores are really the people who know more. And so that they're not so scary, because it's not mysterious. If you know your stuff, you go in and these are straightforward questions. You're going to read them and go, well, I know that, I know that, I know that. And walk out going, oh, okay, that was fair. That was reasonable. That's what they ought to be testing. I would want someone doing this profession for me to know the answers to these questions. That's a good test. If you walk out of it going, what in the world did that have to do with my being a fill in the blank, then that's really not a good test.
I think it's really interesting that the tests that you create help figure out what people are like. And I think it's really cool to see that there are ways that tests can be really positive, but there's also ways that tests can be negative. And when a test is made correctly, it works and it's very helpful. So since Dr. Julian, you've had the experience of working in smaller and larger programs, can you share with us what are the key differences when working in these two different environments?
My first job out of graduate school was with the National Board of Medical Examiners. This is the physician licensure exam. That was at the top of the heap, right? It's a big organization. It had 300 people working for it, and it was the best of the best. And money was no object. We were going to build the best possible test, regardless of what it cost. What a luxury. Then through my career, I went to the nurses, which was a little smaller and the budget was a little tighter. And so we were a little more limited. And then I moved, well, then there was the admissions test, but then I moved to ultrasound techs. Who knew there were 14 different specialties in ultrasound techs? But there were, so 14 different exams. But this was a much smaller organization. It's only 20 people when I joined it, and much tighter budget and fewer people to do things. And so each person had to do a much wider variety of things. You couldn't be such a super specialist anymore because the small program just had fewer people working there. And the budget was more limited. And so you had to plan ahead and say, okay, we need to do this for our test, but there's no money in the budget for it. So I have to make this argument, have to convince my bosses, and then we have to go to the board of directors, and we have to do all of this before they start planning the budget for next year. And that's often in April or May. And so if you wanted to get something done and in the budget, it might take you a year to go through the process of making the argument to get it done. Whereas in the big organization, you would say, we got to do this. And they would say, okay, go do it.
Well, thank you for sharing that perspective. I think it is really helpful to know the differences between working in the two environments. So I have to say, you are certainly involved in very fascinating and important work. Is there something you would like to share with our audience as they explore STEM and careers in STEM?
Okay, so this is the big predictive validity study that we conducted for the MCAT. So basically, does knowing people's MCAT scores help medical schools predict who's going to survive all 4 years of medical school and how well they will do on the licensure exam they have to take at the end? And since they already have the grade point average from college, the question is, does MCAT add anything on top of that? And it turns out that it does, a very satisfying additional amount. And it kind of levels the playing field with the GPAs. If you use just grade point averages, then you need to have a measure of selectivity for the colleges. Because tough colleges, that same GPA indicates a lot more knowledge than an easier college. But once you put the MCAT in this big regression equation that we've built to predict performance, once you have the MCAT in there, you don't need that selectivity index anymore because the MCAT has leveled the playing field. And now everybody's taking the same test, regardless of what college they went to. And so you can compare people who have very different backgrounds. But I'd like to add just a word about statistics in here. I've heard a lot of people say, well, I don't really like math, so I don't think I would like statistics. And I've got to say, it is a totally different brain set. Statistics is much more like we've got this messy toy box and are looking at it going, I wonder what we've got in here. We could pull things out and go, well, let's first look at big kid toys versus little kid toys. And we'll make piles and go, oh, there's a lot more big kid toys. Then we'll go, oh, but there's lots of red ones and no blue ones. And so we can look at the colors, or we could look at, are they soft or are they hard? So we're taking, it's like a analogy. It's like having a knot in a necklace, a big knot in a necklace. And you take one little piece and you pull it out and you make it nice and straight. You make sense out of that one dimension. And you go get another piece and you pull that one out and you make sense out of it. So you're explaining reality. You've got a mess of data, all of these scores, and you're trying to figure out which questions are working, which people are best. It's just all the jumble of numbers, right? And so we just start pulling one little strand out at a time and making sense of, okay, these are the hard items. These are the easy items. Oh, these are the people who answered a lot of items. Here are the people that didn't answer a lot of items. Here's a really weird item that only a couple of people answered right. And those people didn't know anything else on the test. Our hardest items were only answered right by people who didn't know anything else on the test. There's something funny going on here. And that's basically the way we look at tests, is how many people answered the items right, and then which people answered the items right. But I want to say clearly that if you're okay at math or good at math, but you don't really like it, go try statistics. I think if you don't like math, you probably like statistics.
Thank you for sharing that advice and for showing how fun and interesting statistics can be. Even if you don't like math, you might have a lot of fun in statistics.
I think it's fun. Yep.
Now I'd like to thank my special guest, Dr. Julian. It was great speaking with you today. Thank you for spending time with us. And to our viewers, please join us again for another exciting episode and another remarkable STEM professional. You have been listening to Profiles in STEM. Thank you. Katie Culbert signing off.